Welcome to Business at the Speed of Coffee, the one television show for business, by business, about business. Well, what do rugby fans in Auckland, customers of the BNZ, citizens of Auckland, and a few dams in the South Island all have in common? Well, you might ask. It is indeed one man. His name is Doug Mckay, ONZ, Order of the Merit of New Zealand. Please welcome Doug Mckay to Business at the Speed of Coffee.
Hello.
Well, that introduction is going to be a really interesting show today. But before we get on to your chairmanship of the BNZ and your directorships, which are well known, Fletcher Building and Genesis and many others, where did the journey start for Doug Mckay?
Very modestly. My mum and dad were very humble people. And, you know, we never had a university degree in our family's history. We've been in New Zealand since 1852. So it's been a struggle as, new immigrant family, I guess, or a great-great-grandfather back then. And we've built our lives over time progressively. And mum and dad had very humble jobs and beginnings, and they supported myself and my brother well, and they bought a house in a subdivision in Kelston out in West Auckland.
So you're Westie?
When we were children, yes. Yes, they were in a state house in Onehunga for the first few years of their marriage and when I was born. But then we moved out west. They capitalised their state advances or child benefit, whatever it was then, on both of us boys. And they got a deposit for a house, and they lived there all their lives. And they never lived anywhere else. So I went to Kelston Boys High School, just up the road, local school. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, thought it was the best place ever. And at that time in Kelston's history, we were doing very well on a number of fronts. And I did well at school. I was very lucky, had the support of my parents and a couple of mentors in the family. And so I went through to 7th form, captain of the first 15, was deputy head prefect and was in the advanced academic stream. So I exhibited a lot of promise over the years, and let's hope that some people who helped me on the journey think that I might have realised some of it. Well,
it sounds like a real New Zealand story of social mobility. You went to university?
I did. I went to Auckland University and did a Bachelor of Arts, majoring in English and Māori.
Liberal arts at university, Doug, that's really something, but Māori, you are well ahead of your time. Today that's very relevant. Can you speak some Māori today?
I'm not fluent in Māori, Kim, so I'm talking 40 years ago when Auckland University was the hub of the icons of Māori education, Dame Anne Salmon, Ranganui Walker, Hone Kaa. They were all my lecturers and tutors in those days, and I simply loved it. I really enjoyed it. That's why I did it. I enjoyed it. And it gave me so many insights into the true history of New Zealand. I do my best now to cope. Because I lived overseas for so long, I drifted away from using the language, and now I try to be appropriate whenever I can, but I'm not fluent, no.
Interestingly, you started with the liberal arts, which I'm a great fan of. Most of my friends think I'm mad. You know, there's frankly too...
Sir Robert Jones says that.
Yeah, and I agree with him.
Yes.
I'm a real believer in that's what my father did, and certainly I did. Is a basis for business. It's as good as any, and I'd argue that there are rather too many accountants and lawyers dominating many of our boards in New Zealand. Where was the first job?
Actually, I trained to be a school teacher, and it helped subsidise my rugby playing career in those days. I played for Ponsonby with Brian Williams and Andy Hayden, Peter Whiting, Lynn Colling, bunch of All Blacks. And
you didn't quite make the All Blacks.
No, I was never that good. But just being around people like that, you know, was just so much fun. They're still very good friends, many of them. And but I didn't like the school teaching scene when I got into it after I'd trained at Auckland Teachers College, and then struck out into business. And somebody said to me, if you want to be in business, you've got to learn how to sell. So I ended up driving a van around, selling stuff out of it. And
the genesis of a business career was through the sales channel.
yeah, and I still say that to my kids today. They've all got 2 and 3 degrees and wonderful careers, but I still say to them, you know, the biggest challenge in life, and I still believe it, I was told it many, many years ago, is can you get people to give you money because you will do something for them?
Well, that's where I started out, and I think selling is one of the most rewarding things you can do, and it's so underrated anymore.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
And then I was noticed in my selling efforts, and then I was asked to go into marketing. And then a company called Procter & Gamble came along and bought the company I was working for here in New Zealand, and I spent a decade with the biggest multinational.
Well, you learned them from the best. I mean, they wrote the book on marketing, of course.
Yes.
So that set the foundation.
Yes.
At some stage you must have broken through out of the ranks of middle management. Where was the first big break for you that got you noticed by senior management, where the general management type role became available?
Well, the first break came being appointed to the general manager role in New Zealand for P&G.
Oh, okay.
And then I got noticed with the job we were doing here, and I was then moved to Australia. And I became a sector head in Australia, and then eventually moved to be a country manager in one of the Asian countries in Thailand.
Okay.
Then faced the choice, do we carry on and build my corporate career with P&G in the States, because that was the next move. I was offered a global role there, sitting in a corner office somewhere in Cincinnati. And we decided, no, we had 3 boys at that point, 3 young babies in Thailand, and we decided, no, it's time to head back to New Zealand.
And that's when you went into the beer business, is that right?
That's when I joined Douglas Myers in the beer business.
Well, the background of Procter & Gamble would have been ideal for marketing.
Well, the connection there is Kevin Roberts, who was running Lion Nathan for Douglas in those days, was an ex-P&G-er himself.
Yeah.
And he'd heard about me on the P&G alumni network, and he reached out, and Joe McCullum, his HR director at that time, Joe flew up to Bangkok, and we had a wonderful dinner in Thailand that night, and I was sold, and I came home, and I never regretted it. I always thought the time at Lion was just superb. There was some high quality people right through that business.
Well, of course, those are the salad years for Lion, and working around an influential character like Douglas Myers, it would have been exciting times. Were you there when he started moving into China and things like that?
Oh, well, before that, but yes, through that era. I came back and was put in charge of the New Zealand brewery business to start with, and in Auckland here, and then got the whole country. And a lot of the advertising campaigns that are still iconic today were done in my era. Yeah. So I'm very proud of the Spates campaign that everyone remembers. You know, he's got a box at Eden Park.
She wants me to go up to Auckland with her.
Oh, yeah? What's the attraction up there?
Place in the harbour, 500 SL Mercedes, 80-foot yacht. Her old man's got a box at Eden Park.
Oh, yeah?
She doesn't drink Spates, but
she's a hard row finding the perfect woman, boy.
Reckon.
Is the box at Eden Park still New Zealand's #1 status symbol?
I don't know so much about status symbol. It was back in the 70s, that's for sure, and that was the reason it was in that Spates ad we referred to. But it's a great networking opportunity, and I find the people who do buy licenses for the boxes, they use it to entertain their staff, their customers, their partners, and they love it. And now that we've got approval to run concerts at Eden Park, it's going to become an even more important opportunity, because
is that the lifeline you needed?
It's a help. The problem with we have at Eden Park is we inherited a massive debt which was never meant to be ours. It was meant to belong to the various councils of Auckland to do the 2011 Rugby World Cup, the upgrade that went on there. The government fronted with their money, but the councils of Auckland, other than the Auckland Regional Council, Councillor Mike Lee, Chairman Mike Lee, they all walked away from their commitment to give us $10 million each. So we've been left with a debt of $50 million. That is our problem.
Who is it held by? Who carries the paper?
It was the ASB, because they stepped in at the time of the Rugby World Cup. But we went for 10 years with the ASB. We've never missed a payment, and the council have now taken that debt over, which is the right home and where it should be. But I'm hoping over time that debt will become a draft. Yeah,
It should be written off.
because it was never meant to be a debt.
Well, the amenity's there, and the debt is it's a fiction. It should be written off.
But if you want to own a box at Eden Park, now is the time, because never before have we been able to stage concerts. So, you come along to Eden Park and you'll be able to watch Adele or the Rolling Stones.
If they can get into the country.
When they can get into the country. But we've got some great local artists, of course. The Crowded House is touring at the moment, but the biggest of all is 660, and they would love to play at Eden Park, and we would love to have them. Yes.
At some stage, you had a rush of blood to the head and joined Auckland City. Can you explain how on earth that happened and a little bit about that experience?
Well, one of the roles I had after Lion was Chief Executive of Sea Lord, the fishing company, for 5 years.
Oh, yes.
And I worked for Shane Jones, who was my chairman. That was so much fun. Shane and I did wonderful things with that business, and he was such a great guy to work with. But I finished at Sea Lord, and I was approached by a private equity firm out of Sydney, Pacific Equity Partners, and given my background in marketing and food and exporting fish and a beer and a whole lot of things, I ended up helping them on food and beverage acquisitions, and we made 3 in that time that I was with them. We bought Teagle Poultry Company, Griffin's Foods, Independent Liquor off the Ursig family when Michael died in a helicopter accident. Anyway, we did very well with those, and we on-sold them
I do remember
to the next owners, and they were much better and stronger businesses for having us look after them for a while. And then I was at a loose end when I was sort of mid-50s, and the Auckland Super City was being formed at that time. And I had a call from John Waller, who's now deceased, but John was on the Auckland Transition Agency, which was the agency charged by the government to set up the structure.
This came from Rodney Hyde's earlier work.
Rodney was the minister.
Yeah.
He was the minister. And so Rodney approached me and said, look, the ATA thinks you should be the first inaugural CEO of the Super City. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I just feel like it's a worthy cause, but I'm at a stage in my life where I could do a few other things that I have in mind. Anyway, the upshot of it was the government at the time, John Key's government, Rodney Hyde, Mark Ford, who was the chair of the ATA, and John Waller and Wayne Walden, who was on the ATA. They all talked to me. They're all great friends of mine, and I decided that I could do this, and Auckland needed someone who could do it. And so I set myself, I was given 18 months to make the change all happen, bring the 9 odd cities together, the councils, and we did that, and I ended up staying for 3 years to sort of settle it in properly, and it's I think we should be very proud of it. I've thought about it a lot in recent times when you see the mess that Wellington is in at the moment. Their infrastructure's imploding all over them, their political system seems to be broken.
And they can't seem to agree on
what they
want to be like.
We have our challenges agreeing in Auckland too, but that's all healthy debate. But I was reading the infrastructure publication in the Herald last week, and the amount of things going on in Auckland is just phenomenal. And it's because we're there with a single voice, a single purpose, a mayor who can call the shots. Wonderful
Where
thing.
have you landed on Rodney's idea of these independent CCOs, which in a sense, I mean, the purpose of those, as near as I could tell, was to get a business focus on businesses and let the politicians run the political process without a lot of interference. Well, of course, subsequently we've seen an enormous amount of interference. And so, frankly, we're back to where we started, it seems to me from the outside. Is that process one that's going to continue to evolve, or do you think it's going to stay the messy situation that it currently is?
Well, if you think about what it used to be like, you used to have elected politicians sitting on the boards of some of these infrastructure entities like Ports of Auckland and Watercare and so on. Big businesses. And very complex businesses with a need to be, quite au fait with engineering and a whole lot of other things. I don't believe elected politicians are elected because they've got those skills. They are elected because they well represent their communities primarily, and that's a different skill set. So I believe in the CCO model, and it should be populate. The board should be filled with people who have men, women, different genders, different ethnicities, all of the diversity, but people who have subject matter expertise and who can run those businesses well.
Would you agree? Well, I have this view that they should allow them to run independently within guidelines that the politicians mandate them to do, and let them get on with it. It seems to me where the problem is the expectations that sit between what the politicians think they should be doing and what they're actually getting up to. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, if you read the CCO review that Miriam Dean led last year, which there's a lot of it being enacted now, Mayor Goff has taken it on board and he's making the changes that, in many cases, that were recommended. And it's acknowledged as an excellent report. There's fault on both sides with the issues that have arisen out of the CCOs, but I think I just caution people not to write the model off because I think it has a lot going for it. But the issues were two. One was the council has been not up to the mark on providing good, clear strategic direction for where they want water to go and what they want the port to do and a few things like that. And on the other hand, the directors of those companies have not recognised the political mandate by which they are there to run the companies. And they need to be more sensitive to the political pressures that the elected members face every day.
Well, that must have been a big change for you in governance when you came out of the business environment where you tend to do what you think's right to get the job done. Now you've got politicians and other things happening. How frustrating was that? I mean, you did have a very supportive mayor, if I recall.
Len was an excellent mayor. It's just very unfortunate, what happened. But he was an excellent mayor for Auckland. The City Rail Link was his, project. They used to colloquially call it Len's Loop, if you remember. He really stepped out and held the government of the time to account and to sign up for it. So I acknowledge that. The more difficult part is what Mayor Goff has had to do is implement it and pull it together with all the criticism that he's faced on the constructions and that sort of disruption and all that. But this is the thing a city has to go through from time to time. Want that.
Now, after the city, you went on the board as, I think, chair of the Bank of New Zealand. Yes. One of our largest institutions, which is for the most part owned by what's a Transtasman.
It's owned by NAB.
Many New Zealanders are shareholders, of course, in the parent company, so you can't say it's just an Australian company. And I'd argue that through the GFC, the fact that our banks were largely owned by the Australian banks really was what stopped us from sinking. But that's a topic for another day. But coming back to this Trans-Tasman arrangement, to what extent does the bank and the way you treat your customers in New Zealand, is it independent from the parent in Australia?
Well, it's not totally independent because we rely on the group, the NAB group, as do ASB for the Commonwealth group and ANZ for the ANZ group and Westpac for Westpac. We rely on them for the things that we would struggle to supply or do on our own. And a lot of that is about the expensive investment you need in technology. So there's a lot of technology investment that we share. But we do have our own technology as well. We are not constrained at all in terms of products we offer, the rates that we charge for loans, the types of credit cards we have. We're totally free to do whatever we like there. In fact, the board of the New Zealand Australian-owned banks are they're obliged to act independently as part of their
the mandate they get
from the Reserve Bank government, Reserve Bank and the government. So, and we do. We guard our independence jealously.
In terms of integration, you're on the audit committee of the parent bank.
I'm on the board of NAB in Australia.
Well. So there is that Trans-Tasman.
And we have that Trans-Tasman link, and I've got two people from NAB on my board in New Zealand. The CFO for NAB is on our board. We find that's very useful to have Gary on our board because if we want to advocate for new capital or for a big project or something in New Zealand, having the CFO at the table supporting me in the NAB board is really useful.
What are you going to say to Mrs. Jones in Ranfurly or somewhere, who's facing her local BNZ being closed down? Is that a worldwide trend, Or is that you picking on Mrs. Jones in Ranfleet because you just don't want to do business there?
Well, we're certainly not picking on anyone. What we're subject to is massive changes in the way customers are behaving. Customers want to deal with us in their own way.
Yes.
And some of that is through a physical branch, some of that is through a digital channel, some of it is internet banking, some of it is telephone banking, some of it is a mobile mortgage manager, for example. So, and what we're finding is the branch traffic is dropping as people find other ways to engage more conveniently for them. So it makes the economics of bank branches really challenging, but we're all working as an industry together. We're trialling a couple of industry branches down in regional New Zealand.
So the generic bank branch?
Generic bank branch,
that's not a bad
where
idea.
all 4 banks are part
like
of.
a co-op for that
Yes,
town?
yes. At BNZ we've put, I know we had about 2, we could be up to 4 now, mobile banks on wheels that drive around various towns on a schedule, and they are there for half a day or a whole day, and people can do all the
really? So you have somebody who's not digitally enabled, for instance, and they want to talk to a person.
Yes.
They know on Thursday at 2 o'clock they can go and there'll be somebody they can see.
But of all of our branches, we've done the analysis of who goes there, and we find over half the branches have less than 24 people visit a day, and they visit once or twice every 6 months. So, 24 customers a day. They visit twice every 6 months. We know who those people are. And so what we're trying to do, both businesses and retail customers, we are trying to identify who they are, figure out what a better way for them to bank, and then give them personal coaching and support them to transition to a new way of banking, where clearly a branch doesn't work as well for them as it used to. The other thing is cheques are disappearing. Cheques were the commodity of branches.
Well, way ahead of the United States in that.
Yes.
I mean, they're just amazing. They're still in sailing ship days, as near as I can tell, over there. Which brings me to cybersecurity, which is a big issue in every business you want to look at. So, what is the BNZ particularly doing to make their customers feel reassured that at least my money is safe?
Safety is the number one purpose that we've got to live up to as a bank. People want to trust their bank. They want to know their bank is safe and secure, and cybersecurity is part of that. We are investing millions of dollars for the best cyber protection in all of our technology. And I'm not a technical expert, so I'm not going to start reeling off the names of all of the software and the other programs we've got. Plus, we also stand behind our customers when they have a problem, and we will let them know when we become aware of a problem, and we will alert them. We will sometimes make up the loss if they suffer one for a problem, if we can point to our systems failing in some way.
Well, that's reassuring. So
we do that. So we've got lots of policies around it. The Reserve Bank is very diligent in checking on how we are going in the cybersecurity area. They are wanting to see us make progress. They want to track how we're going on the number of incidents we have, and we measure and report that regularly.
Doug, I'm going to plan a national minute silence for the passing of the bank manager. What do you say about that?
Bank managers are as important as they ever were, Kim, maybe even more important, because now they're having to manage customers who come to us in all these various different ways.
Yes.
We base people still in the local regions, but they are working across the country, and branch managers have had their roles changed to help people work from home, work in local offices.
So you're telling me what I remember as the branch still exists in a different form?
In a different form, yes. They still are leaders of many of our people, and they are responsible for segments of our customers.
And they have some decision-making ability?
Very much so, very much so.
Now, because you stand astride of so many industries, we haven't even got onto the football ground, I would like you to cast your mind forward. Now, tomorrow, suddenly I've made you President for Life, Prime Minister of New Zealand. And you're confronted with the same things that Jacinda Ardern's facing with a post-COVID world, travel restrictions, and an economy which is doing quite well compared to other places. But I'd argue could do a lot better in the productivity stakes. What would be your recipe for growing the New Zealand economy with that particular background?
Well, I know other people have said this, so apologies for repeating, but I think COVID when we get through COVID, it is the best opportunity for us to redefine how we want to work in the future. What's the nature of our economy going forward? What sort of society do we want to be? And COVID has created the opportunity for a lot of people to rethink what they do and who they are and how they do it. So look, we've got a good Prime Minister, so I don't have any ambitions in that regard, but I understand your characterisation. What I would do is get ready for the world post-COVID. There's a lot more we can be doing in the next 6 months to get to post-COVID, but once we are post-COVID, I think we're in for the most exciting decade that Australia and New Zealand have seen ever, because through COVID we have been recognised as a part of the world that has done really well to control this disease, and in 6 months' time hopefully we will have eliminated any prospect of this disease, and a lot of people over the next decade will want to either return home or come to Australia and New Zealand.
Well, the civil stakes is the other one. I mean, we've rated very highly in civil cohesion, which they've seen the mess in North America and Europe, and they think, hey, this is okay. But will or can you translate that into direct investment into our businesses here?
Well, not right now, you can't. Our policies are not friendly to direct international investment.
Indeed.
And we need a lot more in international investment to support the likes of companies that have had to now go offshore to expand, like Rocket Lab more recently, and there's any number of these that have been funded by the government as startups and then have ended up being owned by private equity or other international players because there isn't the potential to invest in them here in New Zealand. So I think we've got to have a more overseas investor-friendly regime in New Zealand and bring friendly capital that is willing to be patient and to work to build businesses that have the potential to be global in scale.
Well, to me, that's a very good place to pause because it's been, on this show, a constant refrain, increasing productivity through capitalisation and investment and making it a business-friendly place. And with you at the helm of these three very large businesses, hopefully you can have some influence in this. And I wish you all the very best. And on the next time we get on the show, we'll talk about the rugby games at Eden Park, which we hope will continue a long way into the future. Doug Mckay, thank you for being on Business at the Speed of Coffee.